The afternoon sun beat down on the grand plaza outside the National Palace. Tourists crowded the sidewalks, cameras clicking as they captured photos of the imposing building and its famous guards. These weren't ordinary security personnel. They were the Royal Guard, an elite unit handpicked from the finest soldiers in the country. Each guard stood motionless in their ceremonial uniform, faces stern, eyes fixed straight ahead. Among them was Marcus Webb, a 28-year-old veteran who had served 6 years in the military before earning his place in the Royal Guard. He took immense pride in his position. Every morning he polished his boots until they gleamed. He practiced his stance until his legs could remain steady for hours. To him, this wasn't just a job. It was an honor. Marcus had been stationed at his post since dawn. His feet ached and sweat trickled down his back beneath the heavy uniform, but he didn't move. Tourists walked past, some trying to make him laugh or flinch. Children waved. A few teenagers made silly faces. Marcus remained like a statue, his discipline absolute. Across the plaza, a very different scene was unfolding. Detective Ryan Cole of the city's SWAT unit was having the worst day of his career. He had been chasing a suspect for 3 blocks, and the man had just darted into the crowded tourist area. Ryan was breathing hard, his radio crackling with instructions from his team. The suspect was wanted for armed robbery, and they had been tracking him for weeks. Ryan spotted the man weaving through the crowd near the palace gates. His heart pounded. This was his chance. He couldn't let the suspect escape again. Without thinking clearly, Ryan pushed through the tourists, his hand moving to the taser on his belt. He was so focused on his target that he barely registered his surroundings. The suspect suddenly changed direction, heading toward the palace entrance. Ryan followed, his tunnel vision narrowing on the man's back. He raised his taser, finger on the trigger, ready to stop the criminal before he disappeared into the crowd again. What Ryan didn't see was Marcus. The Royal Guard stood directly in the path between Ryan and his suspect. In the chaos of the moment, with adrenaline pumping through his veins, Ryan made a split-second decision. He fired the taser. The probes shot through the air, trailing their wires behind them, but they didn't hit the suspect. They hit Marcus Webb. The electricity surged through Marcus's body. His muscles locked. His carefully maintained posture crumbled as he collapsed to the ground, convulsing. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Phones came out, cameras already recording. Marcus's fellow guards immediately broke formation, rushing to his aid. Ryan stood frozen, the taser still in his hand, his face draining of color. He realized his terrible mistake in an instant. He hadn't just hit an innocent bystander, he had struck a Royal Guard, on duty. In front of hundreds of witnesses, palace security surrounded Ryan within seconds. His own SWAT team members arrived, confusion written across their faces. The suspect had vanished into the chaos, but nobody was thinking about him anymore. All eyes were on the fallen guard and the officer who had tasered him. Marcus lay on the ground, his body still twitching from the shock. Medical personnel rushed over, checking his vitals, speaking in urgent tones. Other Royal Guards formed a protective circle around their fallen comrade, their faces no longer neutral but filled with barely contained fury. Ryan tried to speak, to explain, but words failed him. His captain grabbed his arm, pulling him back from the scene. Tourists continued filming. The footage was probably already spreading across social media. Ryan's mind raced through the implications. He had just assaulted a member of the Royal Guard. There would be consequences. Serious consequences. Palace officials emerged from the building, demanding answers. Ryan's captain began explaining the situation, his voice tense and apologetic. But the palace security chief wasn't interested in explanations. His eyes were cold as he looked at Ryan. Marcus was helped to his feet, still shaky but conscious. He looked at Ryan and their eyes met for a brief moment. There was no anger in Marcus's expression, only confusion and pain. That somehow made Ryan feel worse. The plaza had descended into controlled chaos. Police cordoned off the area. Witnesses were being questioned. Ryan's SWAT gear suddenly felt heavy on his shoulders. He had been a decorated officer, known for his precision and judgment. In one thoughtless moment, he had thrown it all away. His captain was on the phone now, his face growing grimmer with each passing second. Ryan couldn't hear the conversation, but he could guess. This incident would reach the highest levels of government. The Royal Guard wasn't just ceremonial. They were under the direct authority of the Supreme Commander. the nation's top military official. As Marcus was being examined by medics, refusing to be taken away on a stretcher, Ryan noticed something that made his blood run cold. Palace officials were making urgent calls. More security vehicles were arriving. The atmosphere had shifted from shocked confusion to something more ominous. One of the senior royal guards approached Ryan's captain. Their conversation was brief but intense. The guard's message was clear. This matter was being elevated. Ryan would not simply face departmental discipline. The royal guard demanded justice, and they had the authority to get it. Ryan's radio crackled to life. His team leader's voice came through, strained and worried. The suspect had been apprehended 2 blocks away by another unit. At least that was something, but it felt hollow. The arrest meant nothing compared to what Ryan had done. In the distance, the sound of helicopter rotors began to echo across the plaza. Multiple aircraft were approaching. Ryan looked up, his stomach sinking. Those weren't news helicopters or police birds. They were military transport choppers flying in formation. The Supreme Commander was coming. Word spread through the crowd like wildfire. Tourists backed away from the landing zone, being hastily cleared in the plaza. Ryan's fellow SWAT officers exchanged nervous glances. Even his captain, a veteran of 20 years, looked genuinely worried. The helicopters grew closer, their powerful rotors whipping wind across the plaza. Marcus, now standing on his own, watched the sky with an expression Ryan couldn't read. The other royal guards stood at attention, their earlier fury replaced with military discipline. Ryan realized with dawning horror that his nightmare was just beginning. The Supreme Commander didn't travel with such a convoy for minor incidents. This response meant something far bigger than a simple mistake. He had struck a royal guard, and now the most powerful military figure in the nation was arriving to personally address the situation. The lead helicopter began its descent, and Ryan's world felt like it was collapsing around him. The helicopter touched down with precision, its rotors gradually slowing but still creating powerful gusts of wind. Ryan felt each gust like a physical blow, reminding him of the magnitude of his mistake. Palace security rushed forward, forming a corridor from the aircraft to where the incident had occurred. The door of the lead helicopter opened, and a woman stepped out. Supreme Commander Victoria Chen was not what most people expected. At 52 years old, she stood barely 5'6", with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. But her presence commanded immediate respect. She wore her military uniform with effortless authority, medals glinting on her chest, each one representing years of service and sacrifice. Ryan had only seen her in photographs and news broadcasts. In person, she was far more intimidating. Her eyes swept across the scene, taking in every detail within seconds. She moved with purpose, her stride confident and measured. Behind her, several high-ranking officers and advisors followed, their expressions grim. The Supreme Commander walked directly to Marcus Webb, who immediately snapped to attention despite his obvious discomfort. She spoke to him quietly, her hand briefly touching his shoulder. Marcus responded, his voice too low for Ryan to hear, but his body language suggested he was downplaying his injuries. Commander Chen listened, nodded, and then turned her attention to the palace security chief. They conversed briefly, the chief gesturing toward Ryan. The commander's gaze followed the gesture, and for the first time, her eyes locked onto Ryan. He felt his throat go dry. This was the woman who had led successful operations in 3 different conflicts. She had reformed the entire military structure, earning both fierce loyalty from her troops and grudging respect from her critics. She was known for her fairness, but also for her absolute intolerance of incompetence or recklessness. Commander Chen approached Ryan and his captain. Everyone around them seemed to hold their breath. Even the remaining tourists had gone silent, sensing they were witnessing something significant. The captain saluted sharply. Ryan followed suit, his hand trembling slightly. The commander returned the salute, then stood before them, her expression unreadable. "Your name, officer," she said. Her voice was calm, almost conversational, but there was steel beneath it. "Detective Ryan Cole, ma'am, SWAT Division, Central District," Ryan managed to say, his voice steadier than he felt. "Detective Cole, tell me exactly what happened." Ryan swallowed hard and began explaining. He detailed the pursuit, the suspect's movements, his decision to use the taser. He didn't try to make excuses or shift blame. He simply stated the facts, admitting his tunnel vision, and his failure to identify the Royal Guard in his path. Commander Chen listened without interruption. Her face gave nothing away. When Ryan finished, silence hung in the air for several long seconds. "You're aware," she finally said, "that the Royal Guard operates under special protection status. Any assault on a guard is treated as an assault on the office of the Supreme Commander itself." "Yes, ma'am," Ryan replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're also aware that this assault was captured by dozens of cameras and is likely spreading across the internet as we speak?" "Yes, ma'am." The commander turned to Ryan's captain. "Captain Morris, how long has Detective Cole served in SWAT?" 4 years, Commander. He transferred from patrol after distinguishing himself in several critical incidents. His record has been exemplary until today. "Exemplary," Commander Chen repeated as if testing the word. "And yet, he fired a weapon without proper target identification in a crowded civilian area. He struck a member of the Royal Guard. He created an international incident. This is your definition of exemplary?" Captain Morris's face reddened. "No, Commander. I was referring to his previous service. Today's actions are indefensible." Commander Chen turned back to Ryan. "Do you understand the position you've put me in, Detective? The Royal Guard isn't just ceremony. They represent our nation's honor, our military tradition. When you attacked Guard Webb, you attacked every principle we hold dear." "I understand, ma'am," Ryan said, though his voice cracked slightly. "I take full responsibility." "Full responsibility," the commander echoed. "Easy words, Detective. But responsibility demands consequences." She gestured to one of her aides who stepped forward with a tablet. The commander studied it briefly, then looked back at Ryan. "I've reviewed your service record. Multiple commendations. 2 citations for bravery. You saved 3 children from a burning building 2 years ago. You talked down a suicidal man last year. You're clearly capable of good judgment and heroism, which makes today's failure all the more puzzling." Ryan didn't know how to respond. The commander wasn't wrong. He had built a career on good decisions and quick thinking. But today he had failed spectacularly. "Commander," a voice interrupted. It was Marcus Webb, stepping forward despite a medic trying to hold him back. "If I may speak." Commander Chen's expression softened slightly. "Guard Webb, you should be receiving medical attention." "I'm fine, ma'am. Just shaken." Marcus glanced at Ryan, then back at the commander. "I don't believe Detective Cole acted with malicious intent. He was pursuing a suspect. I happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong moment." "That's generous of you, Marcus, but the fact remains that proper protocol wasn't followed. The detective had a responsibility to ensure a clear line of fire." "Yes, ma'am. But I also know that split-second decisions in the field aren't always perfect. I've made mistakes in my career, too." The commander studied Marcus for a long moment. "You're defending him." "I'm stating facts, ma'am. He made an error, but I don't believe it was criminal. It was human." Ryan felt a strange mix of emotions. This man whom he had just injured was advocating on his behalf. It seemed impossible, yet here Marcus stood, his voice steady despite the ordeal. Commander Chen turned her attention back to Ryan. "It appears Guard Webb is more forgiving than I am, Detective. However, forgiveness doesn't negate consequences. Your actions today require a formal response." Ryan nodded, bracing himself for what was coming. "You will be suspended from active duty pending a full investigation. Your weapon and badge will be surrendered immediately. You will cooperate fully with military investigators, as this incident falls under their jurisdiction given the involvement of the Royal Guard." "Yes, ma'am," Ryan said, his career crashing down around him. "However," Commander Chen continued, and something in her tone made Ryan look up, "Guard Webb's testimony will be taken into account. If the investigation concludes that this was indeed an error in judgment, rather than negligence or misconduct, you may have a path forward. But understand this, Detective, the path will not be easy. You will have to prove yourself worthy of the badge you currently wear." Ryan felt a tiny spark of hope amid the devastation. It wasn't forgiveness, and it certainly wasn't absolution, but it was a possibility of redemption. "In the meantime," the commander added, "you will personally apologize to the entire Royal Guard unit. You will write a detailed report of this incident, and you will reflect deeply on how you allowed yourself to become so focused on one objective that you endangered innocent people." "I will, ma'am. Thank you." Commander Chen's expression remained stern. "Don't thank me yet, Detective. The coming weeks will be the hardest of your life." I suggest you use them wisely. She turned to leave, then paused and looked back at Marcus. Guard Webb, you're relieved from duty for the remainder of the day. Get yourself properly checked out. Yes, Commander. As Supreme Commander Chen walked back toward her helicopter, the tension in the plaza finally began to ease. Ryan stood in the small conference room at the Royal Guard headquarters, feeling more nervous than he had during the plaza incident. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture rigid. Before him sat 20 members of the Royal Guard, their faces a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed hostility. Marcus Webb sat in the front row, his expression neutral. It had been 3 days since the incident. 3 days of sleepless nights replaying the moment over and over in his mind. 3 days of seeing his face on the news, hearing commentators debate whether he should be prosecuted or simply fired. 3 days of avoiding his phone as messages from reporters piled up. Captain Morris stood beside him, lending silent support. The captain had fought for Ryan, arguing that one mistake shouldn't destroy a good officer's career. But Ryan knew he had to fight for himself now. The head of the Royal Guard, Colonel James Hartford, sat at the front of the room. He was a man in his 60s, with silver hair and a face weathered by decades of service. His reputation was legendary. He had trained 3 generations of guards and was fiercely protective of his unit. Detective Cole, Colonel Hartford began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. You asked for this meeting. The floor is yours, Ryan cleared his throat. He had rehearsed this speech dozens of times, but now the words felt inadequate. I want to start by saying there is no excuse for what I did. I fired a weapon without proper target identification. I injured Guard Webb. I created a dangerous situation in a crowded public space. These are failures that go against everything I was trained to do. He paused, meeting the eyes of several guards. Most looked away. Some held his gaze with challenge in their eyes. I've been a police officer for 8 years. I became a cop because I wanted to protect people, to serve my community. For most of those years, I believe I succeeded. But 3 days ago, I failed in the worst possible way. I didn't protect anyone. I endangered everyone. Marcus shifted in his seat but remained silent. I know some of you think I should be in jail right now. Maybe you're right. I also know that no apology can undo what happened. But I need you to understand something. When I fired that taser, I wasn't thinking about making headlines or causing an incident. I was thinking about stopping a dangerous criminal. That doesn't excuse my actions, but it explains them. One of the guards in the back row spoke up. You think that makes it better? You were so focused on glory that you didn't care who got hurt? Ryan felt the words like a punch, but he forced himself to answer calmly. No, it wasn't about glory. It was about doing my job. But you're right that I became so focused on that job that I lost sight of everything else. That's on me. That's my failure. Another guard, a woman with short-cropped hair, leaned forward. Do you have any idea what it's like to stand post for hours? To maintain discipline and honor while tourists mock us and try to make us break? We endure that. Because we believe in something bigger than ourselves. And you attacked one of us while we stood our post. I do understand, Ryan replied. Maybe not fully because I haven't walked in your boots. But I understand dedication. I understand believing in something bigger. That's why I'm here facing you, instead of hiding behind lawyers and union representatives. Colonel Hartford raised a hand, silencing the murmurs that had started. Guard Webb, you were the victim in this incident. What do you have to say? All eyes turned to Marcus. He stood slowly, grimacing slightly. The taser burns were healing, but the pain was still evident. I've had 3 days to think about this, Marcus began. 3 days to be angry, to feel violated, to want justice. And I felt all of those things. But I also did something else. I researched Detective Cole. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through notes. Ryan Cole graduated top of his academy class. Multiple commendations for bravery. He's pulled 4 people from burning buildings. He's talked down 6 potentially violent situations without firing a weapon. Last year, he spent his off-duty hours teaching self-defense to women at a community center. For free, Marcus looked up from his phone. This isn't the resume of a reckless cop. This is the record of someone who cares deeply about protecting people. So yes, he made a terrible mistake. But one mistake doesn't erase years of good service. A few guards shifted uncomfortably. The woman who had spoken earlier frowned. You're defending him? Marcus, he tased you. I'm not defending what he did, Marcus clarified. I'm saying we should judge him by his whole character, not just his worst moment. If we condemn people entirely for their mistakes, what does that say about us? Ryan felt his throat tighten with emotion. He hadn't expected this level of support from the man he'd injured. Colonel Hartford stood, commanding immediate attention. Guard Webb makes a valid point. However, this isn't just about Detective Cole's character. It's about accountability. It's about ensuring this never happens again. He walked to the front of the room, hands clasped behind his back. Detective Cole, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. If you're reinstated as an officer, what will you do differently? Ryan didn't hesitate. I'll never take a shot without absolute certainty of my target and what's beyond it. I'll remember that innocent people are always present, and their safety comes before catching any suspect. I'll slow down even when everything in me wants to move fast. Pretty words, another guard commented, but will you remember them when you're in the heat of the moment? I'll remember, Ryan said firmly, because every time I close my eyes I see Guard Webb falling. That image is burned into my mind. I'll carry it forever. It will make me a better officer or it will destroy me. There's no middle ground. The room fell silent. Colonel Hartford studied Ryan for a long moment, then turned to his guards. I want honest opinions. Should we recommend clemency for Detective Cole, or should we push for maximum prosecution? The debate that followed was intense. Some guards argued for harsh punishment, citing the need to maintain respect for the Royal Guard. Others, influenced by Marcus's words and Ryan's sincerity, suggested that rehabilitation might serve justice better than destruction. Through it all, Ryan stood silently, accepting whatever judgment came. He had said his piece. He had been honest. Now his fate rested in their hands. After nearly an hour of discussion, Colonel Hartford called for a vote. The tension in the room was palpable. Ryan's heart pounded as hands were raised, counted, and recorded. When it was over, Colonel Hartford turned to Ryan. The vote was close, Detective. Very close, but the majority of my guards believe you deserve a second chance. However, this comes with conditions. Ryan exhaled slowly. Anything, sir. You will complete a comprehensive retraining program focused on threat assessment and rules of engagement. You will volunteer 50 hours at the Royal Guard Museum, learning our history and traditions. You will write a training manual on avoiding target fixation for your department, and you will check in with this unit monthly for 1 year to report on your progress. I accept all conditions, sir. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, the colonel said, echoing Commander Chen's words. You have a long road ahead. Many people will question whether you deserve this chance. You'll have to prove them wrong every single day. Marcus stood again. Colonel, if I may, I'd like to volunteer as Detective Cole's liaison to the Royal Guard. Someone should guide him through this process. Several guards looked surprised. Ryan was stunned. You don't have to do that, he said. I know I don't have to, Marcus replied. But I think I should. Besides, this way I can make sure you actually learn what you need to learn. A slight smile crossed Colonel Hartford's face. Very well. Guard Webb, you'll be responsible for Detective Cole's integration program. See that he completes it honorably. Yes, sir. As the meeting concluded, Ryan felt overwhelming relief mixed with determination. He had been given a gift he didn't deserve, a second chance. Now he had to prove he was worthy of it. 2 weeks had passed since the meeting with the Royal Guard. Ryan stood outside the Guard Museum, a converted mansion that housed centuries of military history. The morning air was crisp and his breath formed small clouds as he waited for Marcus to arrive. His suspension from SWAT had been difficult. Ryan had built his identity around being a detective, around solving cases and protecting people. Now he spent his days in administrative limbo, waiting for the investigation to conclude while completing the requirements set by Colonel Hartford. A car pulled up, and Marcus emerged wearing casual civilian clothes. It was strange seeing him without the ceremonial uniform. He looked younger, more relaxed, though Ryan noticed he still moved with military precision. Morning, Marcus said, extending his hand. Ryan shook it, still feeling awkward about the whole situation. Thanks for doing this. I know your days off are valuable. Marcus shrugged. I volunteered, remember? Besides, the museum is usually quiet on weekday mornings. We'll have the place mostly to ourselves. They entered the building and Ryan was immediately struck by the atmosphere. The museum was beautifully maintained with polished floors and carefully lit displays. Photos of guards throughout history lined the walls, dating back over 200 years. Marcus led him to the first exhibit, which detailed the founding of the Royal Guard. Most people think we're just ceremonial, Marcus began, his voice taking on the tone of a practiced guide. They see us standing still and assume that's all we do. But that's only the public face of what we are. He pointed to a display case containing an old uniform. The Royal Guard was founded in 1823, during a period of political instability. The role was simple: protect the nation's leaders, maintain order, and serve as a symbol of military discipline. Every guard who has ever served has understood that we're more than soldiers. We're keepers of tradition. Ryan studied the uniform, noting the careful preservation. I never thought much about the history. To be honest, I always just saw the guards as part of the scenery. Most people do, Marcus admitted, and that's partly intentional. We're supposed to be constant, unchanging. But behind that exterior, each of us has a story. Each of us chose this role knowing how demanding it would be. They moved through the exhibits, Marcus explaining the evolution of the Guard, the famous members who had served, the challenges they had faced. Ryan found himself genuinely interested, seeing the institution in a new light. In one section, photos documented guards who had been injured or killed in the line of duty. Marcus stopped at a particular photo, his expression somber. Guard Thomas Richardson, 1987. He was standing post when a mentally unstable man attacked him with a knife. Richardson didn't break formation until the attacker was subdued by his fellow guards. He sustained 6 stab wounds but survived. He's a legend among us. Why didn't he defend himself? Ryan asked. Because that wasn't his role at that moment. His job was to maintain the post, to show that the Royal Guard doesn't abandon its duty even under attack. Other guards were responsible for neutralizing threats. Richardson trusted them to do their job while he did his. Ryan thought about that level of trust and discipline. I'm not sure I could do that. Different training, different mindset, Marcus replied. In SWAT, you're taught to be proactive, to take charge of situations. In the Royal Guard, we're taught to be part of a larger system. Neither approach is better. They're just different. They continued through the museum, and Ryan began to see patterns. Stories of sacrifice, discipline, and unwavering commitment, but also stories of guards who had made mistakes, who had failed and then rebuilt themselves. There, Marcus said, pointing to a small plaque. Guard Michael Torres, 1995. He fell asleep during a night post. It was a massive scandal. He was almost expelled from the Guard. What happened to him? He accepted his punishment, retrained, and came back. He served for 15 more years and eventually became a senior instructor. Now he's Colonel Hartford's second in command. Ryan looked at Marcus. You're telling me this for a reason. I'm telling you because everyone makes mistakes, Ryan. What matters is what you do after. Torres could have quit, could have let his shame define him. Instead, he used it as motivation to become better. They found a bench in the main hall and sat down. The museum was quiet except for the soft hum of climate control systems preserving the artifacts. Can I ask you something? Ryan said after a moment of silence. Sure. Why are you helping me? I mean, really, you could have let the system destroy me. Most people would have. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Do you know why I joined the Royal Guard? Ryan shook his head. I had a brother, Marcus began, his voice softer now. Daniel. He was 2 years older than me and he was my hero. He was a police officer, actually. Not SWAT, just regular patrol. He loved the job, loved helping people. Ryan sensed where this was going and his chest tightened. 5 years ago, Daniel responded to a domestic disturbance call. When he arrived, the situation was more volatile than dispatch had indicated. He had to make a split-second decision about whether to enter the house or wait for backup. He chose to enter, thinking someone inside might be in immediate danger. Marcus paused, his jaw clenched. There was someone in danger, a woman and her 2 kids. But there was also a man with a gun. Daniel saved those 3 people, but he died doing it. 1 bullet through the vest hit an artery. I'm sorry, Ryan said quietly. The review board analyzed everything. They concluded that Daniel had made an error in judgment by entering alone. They were right, technically. But they missed the bigger picture. My brother died a hero, saving innocent lives. His mistake didn't erase that fact. Marcus turned to look at Ryan directly. When I saw you after the incident, I saw that same conflict in your eyes. You made a mistake while trying to do good. That doesn't make the mistake okay, but it matters. That's why I'm helping you. Because I believe good people who make bad choices deserve the chance to make better ones. Ryan felt his eyes sting with unexpected emotion. Your brother sounds like he was an incredible person. He was. And you know what? He made mistakes before that final call. Every cop does. The difference is, most mistakes don't make the news. Most don't have consequences this visible. But that doesn't make them less real or less important to learn from. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, surrounded by the history of men and women who had served with honor, failed, succeeded, sacrificed, and persevered. Finally, Marcus stood. "Come on. There's one more exhibit I want to show you." He led Ryan to a small room at the back of the museum. Inside was a single display case containing a cracked ceremonial sword and a burned uniform. Guard Elizabeth Morgan, 2003. There was a fire at the palace. Protocol said to evacuate and let the fire department handle it, but Morgan knew there were historical documents in the archives that couldn't be replaced. She went back in against orders and saved them. Her uniform caught fire. She barely made it out alive. Was she punished? Reprimanded officially, celebrated privately? Because sometimes the right choice isn't the safe choice. Sometimes doing good means breaking the rules. Marcus smiled slightly. "Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying what you did was right, but I am saying that life is complicated. Good people sometimes do the wrong thing for the right reasons." Ryan studied the burned uniform, thinking about courage, sacrifice, and the fine line between heroism and recklessness. "I want to be better," he said finally, "not just as a cop, but as a person. This whole experience has made me realize how much I took for granted, how much I thought I knew." "That's a good start," Marcus replied. "But understanding isn't enough. You have to put in the work. Every day, every decision, every moment." "I will," Ryan promised. "I don't know how to repay you for believing in me, but I'll spend however long it takes proving I deserve that belief." Marcus extended his hand again, and this time when Ryan shook it, it felt less like an awkward formality and more like the beginning of a real friendship. "Just be the officer I think you can be," Marcus said. "That's all the repayment I need." 6 weeks after the incident, Ryan found himself in a scenario training room at the police academy. His return to active duty depended on passing a series of evaluations, and this was the most critical one. The room was set up to simulate various high-pressure situations, and today's scenario would test everything he had learned during his suspension. Captain Morris stood in the observation booth above, along with 2 representatives from Internal Affairs, and surprisingly, Colonel Hartford from the Royal Guard. The presence of so many observers made Ryan's palms sweat. The scenario began simply enough. Ryan was given his simulated weapon and told to respond to a robbery in progress. As he entered the mock building, he could hear shouting, the sounds of struggle, and what might have been gunfire. His old instincts kicked in immediately. Move fast, assess threats, neutralize danger. But then he remembered Marcus's words at the museum. He remembered the training exercises he had completed over the past weeks, focusing on slowing down, on seeing the complete picture rather than just the immediate threat. Ryan moved through the scenario methodically. A figure appeared in a doorway and his hand moved toward his weapon, but he paused, processing what he was seeing. The figure was holding something, but it wasn't a gun. It was a phone. The person was a victim, not a perpetrator. In his previous mindset, Ryan might have drawn his weapon, might have created a dangerous situation. Now he called out clearly, identifying himself, asking the person to show their hands slowly. The scenario continued, throwing challenge after challenge at him. A suspect rushed from another room. Ryan had a clear shot but noticed civilians in the background, partially obscured. He held his fire, using verbal commands instead, positioning himself strategically. The suspect in the simulation eventually surrendered and the scenario ended. Ryan stood in the empty room, breathing hard, his heart racing. He had passed the immediate test, but had he done well enough? The door opened and Captain Morris entered, followed by the observers. Morris's expression was neutral, giving nothing away. Detective Cole, one of the Internal Affairs representatives, began, consulting a tablet. "Your response time was 30% slower than your pre-incident average." Ryan's heart sank. But then the representative continued. "However, your threat assessment accuracy was near perfect. You identified 3 potential civilians that our previous testers missed entirely. You made 0 mistakes in target identification. And most importantly, you showed that you could maintain control under pressure without compromising safety." Captain Morris spoke up. "Ryan, I've watched you work for years. Before the incident, you were good, fast, effective, results-driven, but you were also sometimes reckless. You took chances that worked out because you're skilled, not because they were the right choices. Ryan nodded, accepting the criticism. Today, Morris continued, you were different, slower, yes, but better, more thoughtful. You've learned something that many officers never figure out. Speed isn't the same as effectiveness. Colonel Hartford stepped forward. Detective Cole, I've reviewed your progress over the past 6 weeks. Your work at the museum, your retraining, your attitude. I came here today skeptical. The Royal Guard doesn't forget easily, and what you did was serious. Ryan braced himself for harsh judgment. But I'm also a believer in redemption, Hartford said. I've seen men and women make terrible mistakes and come back stronger. You've put in the work. You've shown genuine change. On behalf of the Royal Guard, I'm satisfied that you've completed your obligations to us. Relief flooded through Ryan, though he tried to maintain composure. The Internal Affairs representative made a note on his tablet. Our evaluation is complete. We recommend full reinstatement to active duty, with a 6-month probationary period and mandatory monthly evaluations. Captain Morris smiled for the first time. Welcome back, Detective Cole. Report to the SWAT briefing room tomorrow morning at 0600. After the officials left, Marcus appeared in the doorway. He had been watching from another observation room. Well done, Marcus said simply. I couldn't have done it without you. Ryan replied honestly. The past 6 weeks, everything you taught me, it made the difference. I just showed you some history and talked to you like a human being. You did the hard work. You changed yourself. They walked together through the academy corridors, passing recruits who barely looked old enough to drive. Ryan remembered being that young, that confident, that sure he knew everything. I got something for you, Marcus said, pulling a small box from his jacket. It's not much, but I thought you might appreciate it. Ryan opened the box to find a challenge coin. One side bore the emblem of the Royal Guard. The other showed the city police department badge. In the center, where the two symbols met, was a single word. Unity. It's not official, Marcus explained. I had it made custom. There are only 2 in existence. I have the other one. I figured it might remind you that we're all on the same side, even when it doesn't always feel that way. Ryan held the coin, feeling the weight of it, the meaning behind it. I'll carry it every day. Just don't lose it, Marcus said with a slight smile. Those things are expensive. They shared a laugh, and Ryan realized how much had changed in just 6 weeks. He had gone from viewing the Royal Guard as distant ceremonial figures to seeing them as fellow servants of a greater cause. More than that, he had found an unexpected friend in the very person he had wronged most. That evening, Ryan attended a gathering at a local restaurant. His SWAT team had organized a welcome-back dinner, and the turnout was better than he had expected. Colleagues he hadn't heard from during his suspension showed up, offering support and congratulations. His partner, Detective Sarah Chen, pulled him aside during the meal. I wanted to apologize, she said. I should have reached out more during your suspension. I just didn't know what to say. It's okay, Ryan assured her. I probably wouldn't have known what to say either. The thing is, Sarah continued, what happened to you could have happened to any of us. We all get tunnel vision sometimes. We all make split-second choices that could go wrong. You just had the bad luck of yours being visible to the world. Her words echoed what Marcus had told him, and Ryan felt grateful for the reminder that he wasn't alone in his struggles. As the evening wore on, stories were shared, jokes were made, and for the first time in weeks, Ryan felt like himself again. Not the old version of himself that had been too confident, too quick, too sure, but a newer version, one that had been tested and had emerged different, hopefully better. Around 10 o'clock, Ryan's phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. He saw the news. They did a follow-up story on the incident. Thought you should know. Ryan excused himself and found a quiet corner to check the news on his phone. The story was surprisingly fair, focusing on his rehabilitation and the support he had received from the Royal Guard. There was even a quote from Colonel Hartford, speaking about the importance of learning from mistakes. But what caught Ryan's attention was a comment from Supreme Commander Victoria Chen herself. The article stated, Detective Cole's journey reflects the best values of both law enforcement and military service. He made a serious error, took responsibility, and worked to become better. That's the kind of character our nation needs in its protectors. Ryan read the quote 3 times, Hardly believing the Supreme Commander herself had spoken on his behalf, he texted Marcus back, "Did you have something to do with this?" The response came quickly. "Not me. That was all Hartford. He contacted the commander last week to update her on your progress. Guess she was impressed." Ryan pocketed his phone and returned to the gathering. Captain Morris was telling a story about a case from years ago, and the table erupted in laughter. Ryan sat down, joining the conversation naturally. For the first time since the incident, he wasn't thinking about what he had lost or what he had done wrong. He was thinking about what came next, about the cases he would work, the people he would help, the lessons he would remember. Sarah raised her glass. To Ryan, "Welcome back. We missed you." Everyone at the table raised their glasses in agreement. "Welcome back," they chorused. Ryan raised his own glass, feeling the weight of the challenge coin in his pocket. "Thanks, everyone. It's good to be home." And as he looked around at the faces of his colleagues, his friends, his team, Ryan knew that home wasn't just a place. It was a sense of belonging, of purpose, of being part of something larger than himself. He had almost lost it, but through hard work and the unexpected grace of others, he had found his way back. Tomorrow, he would start fresh. But tonight, he would simply be grateful. 3 months had passed since Ryan's reinstatement. The morning briefing at SWAT headquarters felt routine now, though Ryan approached each day with a mindfulness that hadn't existed before. He listened more carefully, asked more questions, and never assumed he had all the answers. Captain Morris stood at the front of the room, pulling up surveillance footage on the large screen. "We've got a developing situation at the Grandview Hotel downtown. Armed suspects have barricaded themselves on the 14th floor. We believe they're holding at least 3 hostages." Ryan studied the footage, his mind immediately analyzing entry points, potential complications, civilian risk factors, but he caught himself before speaking, waiting to hear the complete briefing. "The suspects are connected to the armed robbery ring we've been tracking for 6 months," Morris continued. "They're desperate, which makes them dangerous. We need to move carefully on this one." Sarah leaned over to Ryan. "Sounds like your kind of situation." "High stakes, multiple variables," Ryan nodded but said nothing. His kind of situation used to mean rushing in, taking charge, making things happen. Now it meant something different. It meant being part of the team, trusting the process, and making smart decisions rather than fast ones. The SWAT team mobilized quickly, arriving at the Grandview Hotel within 20 minutes. The area was already cordoned off, with regular police establishing a perimeter. Civilians were being evacuated from the building, streaming out in controlled groups. Ryan geared up methodically, checking each piece of equipment twice. His teammates noticed his deliberate pace. "You okay?" asked Marcus Chen, no relation to Supreme Commander Chen, one of the team's veteran members. "Just being thorough," Ryan replied. "Good. Thorough keeps us alive." The tactical plan was laid out. The team would split into 2 groups. One would approach from the stairwell, the other from the service elevator. The goal was to create multiple pressure points while maintaining maximum safety for the hostages. Ryan was assigned to the stairwell team. As they moved into position, his radio crackled with updates. The suspects were becoming more agitated. Time was a factor, but so was precision. They ascended the stairs quietly, each member moving in sync with the others. Ryan found himself in the middle of the formation, neither leading nor following but integrated into the team's rhythm. It was a position he had learned to appreciate during his retraining. At the 14th floor, they paused. Through the door, they could hear voices, both angry and frightened. The negotiator was on the phone with one of the suspects, trying to de-escalate, but the situation was deteriorating. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. Ryan's body tensed, adrenaline surging, every instinct screaming to move, but he held position, waiting for orders. The team leader's voice came through the radio, calm and measured. "All teams, that was a warning shot. Suspect fired into the ceiling. Hostages appear unharmed. Hold positions." More tense minutes passed. The negotiator kept talking, but the suspect wasn't cooperating. Then another sound, breaking glass followed by screaming. "Suspect has broken a window," someone reported. "Possible suicide risk or escape attempt." The team leader made the call. Both teams were moving in. Green light on engagement if hostages are in immediate danger. Rules of engagement apply. Clear lines of fire only. They breached the door, moving into the hallway with practiced efficiency. The layout matched the floor plans they had studied, but reality always contained surprises. Ryan noticed immediately that several doors were open when they should have been closed, creating multiple sight lines and potential ambush points. The sound of their entry alerted the suspects. More shouting erupted from the target room. Ryan's team moved forward, covering each angle, communicating in short, clear bursts. They reached the room where the hostages were being held. Through a partially open door, Ryan could see inside. 3 civilians, bound and terrified, were on the floor. 2 suspects stood near them, weapons drawn. A third suspect was at the window, half leaning out, clearly distressed. The team leader signaled for positions. Ryan took his assigned spot, which gave him a partial view of the second suspect. His finger rested alongside the trigger guard, not on the trigger itself. Every lesson from his retraining echoed in his mind. Clear line of fire. Verify target. Consider what's beyond. Maintain discipline. The negotiator's voice came through a bullhorn, trying one more time to talk the suspects down. For a moment it seemed like it might work. The first suspect lowered his weapon slightly, uncertainty flickering across his face. Then the suspect at the window made a sudden movement, reaching for something on his belt. The situation exploded into action. "Gun, gun, gun!" someone shouted, but Ryan held his fire. He could see what others might have missed. The suspect was reaching for a phone, not a weapon. The man was panicking, trying to make a call, not attacking. "Hold fire," Ryan called out. "He's reaching for a phone." His call came just in time. The team held position and the suspect pulled out a cell phone, hands shaking. The immediate crisis passed, and in that moment of hesitation, the negotiator's words finally broke through. The first suspect dropped his weapon. Then the second. The situation de-escalated rapidly after that, and within minutes all 3 suspects were in custody. The hostages were safe and no shots had been fired. In the aftermath, as paramedics attended to the shaken hostages, Captain Morris approached Ryan. "That was good work back there. You read that situation correctly when others might have reacted differently." Ryan didn't feel proud exactly, more relieved that his training had held, that he had been able to see clearly despite the pressure. "Just doing what I was taught, sir." "No," Morris corrected. "You did more than that. You stayed calm, you observed, and you communicated clearly. Old Ryan might have taken that shot. It was true, and Ryan knew it. The old version of himself would have seen a threat and reacted. The new version had seen the whole picture. Later that evening, after the paperwork was completed and the debriefing was done, Ryan found himself at the Royal Guard headquarters. He had been stopping by regularly to meet with Marcus Webb, their friendship having grown beyond the obligatory check-ins. Marcus was off duty, wearing jeans and a casual shirt, looking nothing like the stoic guard Ryan had tased months ago. "Heard about your hostage situation," Marcus said as they sat in the small cafe near the headquarters. "Sounds like you handled it well." "Team effort," Ryan replied. "But yeah, I felt different out there. More aware. Less reactive." "That's growth," Marcus observed. "You know, when I first agreed to help you through this process, I wasn't sure if you'd really change. A lot of people go through the motions of rehabilitation without actually transforming. But you're different. I had good teachers and strong motivation." Ryan pulled out the challenge coin Marcus had given him. It was already showing wear from being carried every day. "This thing reminds me every morning what's important." They talked about other things for a while. Marcus shared stories about the guard, about the funny incidents that happened behind the scenes that tourists never saw. Ryan talked about cases he was working on, getting Marcus's perspective on situations involving military personnel. As they were wrapping up, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression shifted to one of surprise. "What is it?" Ryan asked. "Commander Chen is hosting a reception next week, some kind of ceremony honoring exemplary service members. She wants both of us to attend." "Both of us? Why me?" Marcus showed Ryan the message. "Says you're being recognized for demonstrating exceptional growth and commitment to professional excellence in the face of adversity." That's pretty high praise from the Supreme Commander. Ryan felt a mixture of emotions. Pride certainly, but also humility. He hadn't done anything exceptional. He had simply worked hard to correct his mistakes. "Will you go?" Marcus asked. "Do I have a choice?" Ryan replied with a slight smile. "There's always a choice. But I think you should go. It's not about seeking recognition. It's about showing others that redemption is possible, that people can change." The following week, Ryan found himself in a formal uniform he rarely wore, standing in the grand hall of the military headquarters. The room was filled with decorated officers, government officials, and distinguished guests. He felt distinctly out of place. Marcus stood beside him, looking perfectly comfortable in his formal Royal Guard uniform. "Relax," Marcus whispered. "You earned this, did I though?" Ryan whispered back. "I tased you. I created an international incident. Now I'm being honored? You're not being honored for the incident. You're being honored for what you did after. There's a difference." The ceremony began and various service members were recognized for their accomplishments. A pilot who had performed a daring rescue, a medic who had saved lives under fire, a logistics officer who had revolutionized supply chain efficiency. Then Supreme Commander Victoria Chen took the podium, her presence commanding immediate attention. "Our final recognition tonight," she began, "is a bit unusual. It doesn't celebrate a single act of heroism or a career of distinguished service. Instead, it acknowledges something equally important: the courage to face failure, to accept responsibility, and to emerge better than before." Ryan felt every eye in the room turn toward him. "Detective Ryan Cole," Commander Chen continued, "made a serious mistake in the line of duty. He injured a member of the Royal Guard, compromised security, and could have faced severe legal consequences. But instead of making excuses or accepting defeat, he chose accountability and growth." She gestured for Ryan to approach the podium. His legs felt unsteady as he walked forward. "What makes Detective Cole's journey remarkable," the commander said, "is not that he failed. We all fail. It's that he faced his failure with honesty and used it as a catalyst for genuine change. In doing so, he has become a better officer and a better person." She pinned a commendation ribbon on Ryan's uniform. It wasn't the highest honor, but it represented something more meaningful: recognition of transformation. "Let Detective Cole's example remind us all," Commander Chen concluded, "that our worst moments don't have to define us. Our response to those moments can." The room erupted in applause. Ryan shook the commander's hand, overwhelmed by the moment. As he returned to his spot beside Marcus, his friend gave him an approving nod. After the ceremony, many people approached Ryan, offering congratulations and sharing their own stories of overcoming mistakes. Each conversation reinforced what Marcus had been teaching him. Everyone struggles, everyone fails, and the measure of a person lies in how they rise afterward. As the evening wound down, Ryan found a quiet moment with Marcus on a balcony overlooking the city. "Thank you," Ryan said simply, "for everything. For believing in me when you had every reason not to." Marcus looked out at the city lights. "You know what I learned from all of this? That forgiveness isn't weakness. It's actually one of the strongest things we can offer someone. Not blind forgiveness that ignores wrongdoing, but intentional forgiveness that creates space for growth." Ryan nodded, understanding on a deeper level now. "Your brother would be proud of you." "I think he would be," Marcus agreed. "And I think he'd be proud of you too. You could have given up. Instead, you fought to become better. That takes real strength." They stood in comfortable silence, two men from different worlds who had been brought together by a terrible mistake and had forged something meaningful from it. Ryan looked at the challenge coin in his hand one more time before pocketing it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cases, new opportunities to prove himself. But tonight he was content to simply stand here, grateful for the chance to start again. 1 year after the incident, Ryan stood in front of a room full of police academy recruits. Captain Morris had asked him to speak about his experience, and after some hesitation, Ryan had agreed. Teaching wasn't something he had ever imagined himself doing, but as he looked at the young faces before him, he felt a sense of responsibility. "My name is Detective Ryan Cole," he began, "and I'm here to tell you about the worst mistake of my career." The room went silent. These recruits had heard about the incident. Some had probably watched the video online, but hearing about it from Ryan himself was different. He walked them through that day, sparing no details. The pursuit, the adrenaline, the tunnel vision, the moment the taser probes hit Marcus instead of the suspect. He described the immediate aftermath, the investigation, the public scrutiny. "I stood where you're sitting not that long ago," Ryan continued. "I was confident, well-trained, and absolutely certain I knew what I was doing. I thought good training and good intentions were enough. I was wrong. He pulled out his phone and displayed a photo of himself with Marcus, both of them smiling at the camera. It had been taken just last week at a community event. This is Guard Marcus Webb, the man I injured. He should have been my enemy. He should have wanted me prosecuted to the fullest extent. Instead, he became my teacher, my friend, and one of the people I respect most in this world. Ryan put the phone away and looked directly at the recruits. Here's what I want you to understand. Every one of you will make mistakes in your career. Some will be small. Others might be catastrophic like mine, but the mistake itself isn't what will define you. What matters is what comes after. He spent the next hour discussing the lessons he had learned. The importance of slowing down even when everything inside screams to move fast. The value of seeing situations completely, rather than just focusing on the primary threat. The necessity of maintaining awareness of innocent people in any operation. The irony, Ryan said, is that I'm actually a better officer now than I was before the incident. I catch more suspects. I solve more cases. But I do it with less collateral damage and more thought. My success rate is higher because I'm more careful, not less. A recruit raised his hand. Do you still think about it? The incident? Every single day, Ryan admitted, but not in the way you might think. I don't dwell on it with guilt or shame anymore. I think about it as a reminder. It keeps me grounded. It keeps me honest about my own limitations. After the lecture, several recruits approached with questions. One young woman asked about dealing with public scrutiny after a mistake. A young man wanted advice on maintaining confidence after facing failure. Ryan answered each question honestly, drawing from his own experience. As he was leaving the academy, his phone rang. It was Marcus. Hey, I'm heading to the National Palace for my shift. Want to grab coffee after? There's something I need to talk to you about. They met at their usual cafe, and Ryan immediately sensed Marcus had something important on his mind. I got accepted, Marcus said without preamble. Accepted to what? The officer candidate program. I applied 3 months ago. If I complete it, I'll become a commissioned officer in the military. It's always been a dream of mine. Ryan felt a complex mix of emotions, pride in his friend's achievement, but also sadness at the potential change to their friendship. That's incredible, Marcus. Congratulations. Thanks. But here's the thing. The program is 18 months, and I'll be stationed across the country for most of it. I wanted to tell you in person because, well, you've become important to me. This friendship we built, it matters. It matters to me too, Ryan said sincerely. But you can't turn down this opportunity because of me. This is your future. I'm not turning it down, Marcus assured him. I'm accepting it. I just wanted you to know that distance won't change what we've built. You turned one of the worst moments of my life into something meaningful. That's not something I'll forget. They talked for another hour, discussing Marcus's plans, his hopes for his military career, and his excitement about the challenges ahead. When they finally parted ways, they shook hands, then embraced briefly. Stay in touch, Ryan said. Always. The months that followed brought changes. Marcus left for his training program. Ryan continued his work with SWAT, building on his improved skills and mindset. He started volunteering as a mentor for officers who had faced disciplinary action or were struggling with mistakes they had made. His own experience gave him credibility that others lacked. One afternoon, 6 months after Marcus had left, Ryan received an urgent call from Captain Morris. We've got a situation at the National Palace. Active shooter. Royal Guard members down. We need all available units. Ryan's blood ran cold. The palace. The Royal Guard. He was in his car and responding before Morris had finished speaking. The scene was chaos when he arrived. Multiple ambulances, police vehicles everywhere, and civilians being evacuated in a panic. Ryan checked in with the command post and was briefed quickly. Unknown number of shooters inside the palace. At least 3 Royal Guards confirmed hit. We don't know how many civilians are still inside. This is bad, Ryan. Ryan geared up, his mind racing. He thought of all the guards he had gotten to know over the past year. Colonel Hartford, who had given him a second chance. The guards who had voted to support his redemption. These weren't just names to him anymore. They were people. The tactical team moved into the palace, clearing rooms methodically. Ryan maintained his discipline, checking every corner, verifying every target, keeping awareness of his team members and potential civilians. They found the first wounded guard in a hallway. He was alive but badly hurt. Ryan helped stabilize him while others continued the sweep. The guard looked up at him, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Detective Cole," the guard whispered. They went toward the main hall. "There are civilians there. School group, children." Ryan's jaw clenched, but he maintained his composure. "We'll get them out. Stay with the medic." The team moved toward the main hall where they could hear shouting and crying. Through a partially open door, Ryan saw the situation. 2 armed men had approximately 20 people cornered, including what looked like a dozen school children on a field trip. The tactical team leader assessed the situation. "We need to wait for the negotiator. Too many civilians for a direct assault." But one of the shooters was becoming increasingly agitated, waving his gun at the hostages. The children were crying, their teacher trying desperately to keep them calm. Ryan remembered a layout detail from his volunteer time at the Royal Guard Museum. There was a service entrance to the main hall that wasn't on most floor plans. He had learned about it while studying the building's history. "I know another way in," Ryan told the team leader. "Service entrance, northeast corner. It comes out behind a display case that might provide cover." The leader considered this. "You sure about this? I spent 50 hours volunteering here. I know this building." They split the team. Most would maintain position at the main entrance, ready to act if the situation deteriorated. Ryan and 3 others would attempt the flanking maneuver through the service entrance. Moving through the narrow service corridors, Ryan felt the weight of responsibility. If he was wrong about this entrance, if his memory was faulty, he could be leading his team into a trap. But as they emerged exactly where he had predicted, behind the large display case, he allowed himself a moment of relief. From this position, they had a clear view of the shooters but were concealed from them. The team leader signaled the plan, simultaneous engagement on his mark, prioritizing the safety of the hostages above all else. Ryan focused on his assigned target, the shooter closest to the children. His breathing steadied. His finger moved to the trigger. Every lesson, every moment of training, every reminder of what could go wrong if he rushed this shot. It all came together. The team leader gave the signal, 4 shots, perfectly coordinated, and both shooters were down before they could react. The hostages screamed but were unharmed. Ryan and his team immediately moved to secure the scene, check for additional threats, and ensure everyone's safety. The children were terrified, but physically fine. Their teacher was in shock but managed to help corral the students toward the exit, where other officers were waiting. Ryan helped carry one of the smaller children who was too scared to walk. As they cleared the building and handed off the children to paramedics, Ryan felt the adrenaline begin to fade, replaced by profound exhaustion. Colonel Hartford appeared, having rushed to the scene when he heard about the attack. His face was pale but determined. "Detective Cole, I'm told your knowledge of the building was critical to resolving this situation." "Just used what I learned during my volunteer time, sir. Guard Robertson is wounded but stable. I believe the other injured guards are receiving treatment. Thanks to you and your team, this could have been so much worse." Hartford extended his hand, and Ryan shook it firmly. The aftermath took hours. Statements, debriefings, medical checks. By the time Ryan was cleared to leave, the sun was setting. He sat in his car for a long moment, processing everything that had happened. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, who had somehow already heard the news. "Heard about the palace. You okay?" Ryan replied. "Yeah. Saved the day using what you taught me about the building. Knew those museum tours would pay off. Proud of you. Couldn't have done it without everything I learned from you. Miss having you around. Miss you too, but we'll always be connected. Distance doesn't change that. You're my brother, Ryan." Ryan stared at that last message, feeling emotion well up. Brother. It was the highest compliment Marcus could give, considering what his actual brother had meant to him. 2 weeks later, Ryan received an official letter from Supreme Commander Chen. It contained a formal commendation for his actions at the palace, but more importantly, it included a handwritten note. "Detective Cole, when we first met, I was prepared to end your career. Today I'm honored to recognize that career's finest moment. Your growth from that difficult day to this heroic action represents the best of what we hope to see in our service members. You've proven that mistakes don't define us, our responses to them do. Continue making us proud." Ryan framed the note and hung it in his office right next to the challenge coin Marcus had given him, which now sat in a small display case. Months turned into a year, and Ryan's reputation continued to grow. He was promoted to senior detective and given more responsibility for training others. The incident that had nearly destroyed him had become the foundation of a stronger, more thoughtful career. When Marcus finally completed his officer training and returned to the city with his new lieutenant's bars, they met at their old cafe. Marcus looked different in his officer's uniform, more mature, more confident. But his smile was the same. "Lieutenant Webb," Ryan said, standing to shake his hand. "Sounds good. It does, doesn't it?" Marcus grinned. "But to you, I'm still just Marcus." They spent hours catching up, sharing stories from the past year, talking about their futures. As the evening grew late, Ryan pulled out the challenge coin. "You know, when you first gave me this, I thought it was just a nice gesture. But it's meant more than you probably realized. Unity. That's what we built from a terrible situation. Real unity." Marcus pulled out his own coin. Two sides of the same coin, literally. Different roles, different paths, but the same commitment to serving something bigger than ourselves. They clinked the coins together like a toast. "To second chances," Ryan said. "To transformation," Marcus added. "To friendship," they said together. Outside the cafe window, the city lights sparkled against the darkening sky. The National Palace stood in the distance, its royal guards maintaining their eternal vigil. Somewhere in the city, police officers were responding to calls, making split-second decisions, trying their best to serve and protect. Ryan thought about that day on the plaza, the day that had changed everything. If someone had told him then that his worst mistake would lead to his greatest growth, that the man he injured would become his closest friend, that failure would become the foundation of success, he never would have believed it. But life had a way of surprising you, and sometimes, just sometimes, terrible moments could transform into something beautiful. Not because the terrible moment wasn't terrible, but because of what people chose to build from the wreckage. Ryan looked at Marcus, this man who had shown him grace when he deserved judgment, who had offered friendship when he expected condemnation, who had believed in his potential when he had doubted himself. "Thank you," Ryan said quietly. "For everything. For seeing who I could become instead of just who I was." Marcus smiled. "That's what brothers do. And that's what we are now. Brothers in every way that matters." As they left the cafe together, walking into the cool night air, Ryan felt complete. Not perfect, never perfect, but complete, whole, transformed, and ready for whatever came next.